mean, I think these can be some of our best allies, but some of our worst foes as well. People who are stuck in their own developmental process, in their own misunderstandings, in their own self-hatred, in their own rebelling against that they may somehow be different, and often that difference is equated with being broken.
Mm-hmm.
You're not fighting for your recognition. You're fighting their own internalized neurophobia.
Yeah.
Is that the word?
Yeah. That sounds about, yeah.
And so you can't convince them necessarily of your neurodivergence because they see the same traits in them and they go, well, I'm not that, so you can't be that either.
Yeah.
I will take this as an example for myself. Long before I was diagnosed with ADHD, I used to teach people how to do things to accommodate their ADHD because I had a lot of inherent skills that they didn't realize were me compensating for things. And people would say, well, how do you know how to do this? How do you know how it works for ADHD? And I would say, well, because I've done it with other people who have ADHD and it works. How did you figure this out? And I would just kind of blankly stare at them. And before you hit that kind of titration point, that tilting point, that fulcrum point where you go from, I'm neurotypical and I just do these things that are very much compensating for ADHD, it's like you build a case that even when people point out, hey, this is an ADHD thing, hey, this is an ADHD thing, you go, oh, well, that might be correlated, but that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm special. I'm unique. And yet the world doesn't make sense
Mm-hmm.
because you can't ever find a pattern for what you're doing. It just feels like you're successfully playing a game of whack-a-mole and somehow hitting all the moles, even though it's an algorithm right underneath the table. And then at some point you go, oh, maybe I should stop thinking I'm special because the entire field of psychology is based on repeatable behavioral characteristics that stand out. So you seeing that in me isn't prescience. It's not foresight. It's pattern recognition. Oh shit. I've had ADHD all along. I was just compensating for it before I even realized I needed systems to build it.
Yeah.
And that you're facing with people who, right, they're your boss. They're successful. They've done all these things. They think they are an exception, not the real.
Yeah. Well, and it feels like too that there's the curse of masking wrapped up inside of that as well. Like if you're a high masking person at work and you're able to perform and you're cultivating this persona that they only see of you performing in a particular way, and then all of a sudden you can't mask anymore. You hit that wall. You have hit some form of burnout and you have got to unmask now. And you've done the hardest part of unmasking, which is asking for help and an accommodation or an adjustment or something. And then you're met with that kind of a response. It just confirms you need to mask again. It heightens your tense, that tense feeling that you have to go back to. So I really felt for this person when they reached out to me for that reason in particular.
Do you remember that feeling? I remember that feeling of before I knew I had autism, and here I was masking and extending myself and being gregarious and being very uncomfortable. And I realize now overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
But I would go into social situations and I would see people who knew they were autistic or were further along and just realized they needed more introversion time. And I would be like, you're not going to come downstairs and greet me, but I'm coming over to your house. Buck up and do it.
Yeah.
And now I look back and I go, oh God, I was, I think, so angry with them because they gave themselves a level of grace and understanding around their neurodivergence that I wouldn't allow myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other thing too, is when you're so used to, one, not knowing officially that you have ADHD or autism, and two, that you're so used to buckling down, dissociating, grinding, putting yourself, fawning, people pleasing to show up and mask for others.
Yeah.
When other people don't do it to you and you vibe with them because you're both autistic or you're both ADHD and you're like, F you.
Yeah.
It's not that you get to get out of this uncomfortable situation and I don't.
Yeah. And you can feel it in your body. Like you can literally feel it in your, like I'm sure it's your nervous system, but I know I feel that when I've had that moment, I felt it in my body. But also it feels like there's an element of, I thought we were on the same page, and it's like you're not, I wouldn't say your trust is broken, but it's like, yeah, my teammate just let me down a little bit. Like, come on, I thought we did this thing together and now there you are doing that thing. And it's just, but the goal is you can get there by, getting your needs met and regulating and getting closer to understanding what those needs are for yourself and taking that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that adage of misery loves company,
Yeah.
right? Like if I'm in here, if you and I are an over the road trucker team, right? We're driving tandem, and I'm willing to sit in this seat, in this driver's seat, until my butt goes numb, and my hands hurt because I've been holding the steering wheel for so long, and I've done an 8-hour shift. You should do an 8-hour shift too, and you should sit here until your butt goes numb and your hands shake. But instead, you say, "Well, no, like my back's more important than this thing we're hauling, these cars. So I'm only going to go do 4 hours of my 8-hour shift and then take a break and rejuvenate." Oh, I could do that?
Yeah.
Oh, we could have just been delayed the entire time. And then there's the other thing too, I think, where sometimes neurodivergents take advantage of other neurodivergents.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they're further along, maybe they're in a greater position of power, and they've figured out, without ever coming out as autistic or ADHD, how to push tasks down to other neurodivergents that are in their employ that are detrimental to their health.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really not an equity thing. It's really not I'm taking my 4 hours to take care of my body. You take your 4 hours to take care of your body. It's, oh no, yeah, exhaust yourself. Do 8 hours. I'm going to take 4 hours.
Yeah.
Power differentials, right? Like not all neurodivergents are well-meaning, just like not all neurotypicals are well-meaning.
Oh,
I
yes.
see that.
Well, and you talk a lot about this with relationship building, the emotional intelligence that's needed in that. Because what I instantly thought of when you said that was two things: personal relationship and work relationship. Personal relationship going, we're both ADHD, we're both neurodivergent, we're both, of some kind. I can do this. Why can't you do this? But because your ADHD is such a different scale than my ADHD, but I can do this because and then there's that tension in the relationship. Like, well, no, you need to see me. You need to see me for who I am. You need to see me for how mine is different from yours. And, that's such an easy trap to fall into. And then in the workplace situation, it's like, whether you've disclosed or not, there's that tension, especially as you said, for someone with a more power dynamic. And I've run into this so much in my career of like, well, like you said, buck up, come on, everyone's doing this. You can do this too. Just get it done. Just get it done. Just get it done. And those overworking individuals are killing themselves to get to this, goal or this thing or whatever that they're trying to work towards. But you watch them degrade in what they're able to accomplish the more they push past their threshold. Again, whether they are or aren't neurodivergent, and it just destroys. And meanwhile, I'm like, well, that's, I have found that getting deeper into my 40s, I give less of a shit about that, because it's like I'm able to unmask more. I'm able to see that for what that is and go, no, my body cannot do that, won't do that, doesn't want to do that. No, thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's like that scene from the first Ever Wears Prada where they're at the photo shoot trying to find Python headbands or something, and they're switching out the photos, and Stanley Tucci says to Anne Hathaway, "What's wrong? Why do you look like that?" And she goes, "Oh, my personal life's barely hanging on by a thread." And he goes, "You must be doing well at work." And she said, "What happens when my social life blows up?" And he goes, "You get a promotion." Except when you're neurodivergent,
Yeah.
it's not the glamorous world of high fashion.
Right.
When your life blows up, you don't get a promotion.
No.
You get fired.
Get fired.
And yet there's this idea that to be successful, oftentimes for neurodivergents, our personal lives are hanging on by a thread. I see this all the time in clients I work with who say, I give it all to my work, and I get home and my partner gets nothing.
Yeah.
My kids get nothing. I lay on the couch and I vegetate. And they're very able, when we start to break down the difference between recovery versus reconstitution, restitution, kind of taking care of yourself. There's a difference between just being so starved for dopamine you can't do anything but just recover, or still having enough intrapsychic energy to do something. Go work out, work in your garden, do something creative. That those are very different amounts of reserves at the end of the day.
Well, and I think that's what we need to sort of help more people come to, is that rest looks so different for us. Recovery looks so different for us. And
how does that look different for you?
And like, well, it's just as you just like, I want to come home and I will throw on YouTube and watch really old soap operas for like a half hour. And like that will brings me right down. It regulates me, or, I get caught up on really stupid special interests that are just like mine that I do not want to talk to anybody about. But I want to like consume that content. And then after like a half hour, I'm good. I'm regulated. If we were to use that battery analogy of like, I've still got, some battery life left at the end of the workday.
The reason why I was asking that is because I think that neurotypical people also need to bracket
Yeah.
recovery time
Mm-hmm.
versus rejuvenation time.
Yeah.
And it's just that because neurodivergent brains with ADHD are more exhausted by having to fight through the inattention, fight through the astatic noise, the misfirings of neurons as we think throughout the entire day. And because autistic people have difficulty with transitions, with inhibition that leads to overstimulation,
Yeah.
recording an entire boring 8-hour workday in 4K realness,
Yeah.
when you really only needed maybe an analog copy, right? You only needed some Polaroids.
Yeah.
Your brain doesn't automatically do that.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, now I have to sort through 8 hours of boring bullshit.
Yeah.
It's just that's why neurodivergent brains tend to need to, I find, be even more intentional.
Yes.
Because our brains aren't automatically doing the background work it seems neurotypical brains do
Mm-hmm.
to keep them healthy. But I think that, right, like the whole idea that autistics and ADHDers have the canary in the coal mine brain.
Yeah.
Like we are the first person to smell the toxic gas.
Yep.
To smell the burnout. It'll happen to everyone. It just happens to us first.
Yeah, we're the first to notice it. We're the first to mention it. And you're right. At the end of the day, I need more time to sort. I think you said this in a video the other day. I think where you're recording it in 4K, but you need that time to sort everything into its place so that you can be functional in the way that you need to. And I really related to that because I was thinking about that as well, as like, especially after a long day, processing. It's my nervous system's finally coming back down from, masking all day. And now I'm having those aha moments of throughout my day where I'm realizing, oh, this is what just happened. Oh, that's what that thing was. Oh, okay. I need to follow up on that tomorrow. And I'm putting them in their categories. And now, okay, now I can be functional for, the people in my lives outside of work. You mentioned earlier, people pleasing and fawning. And I want to go back to that because that you had made a video a few days ago about how the relationship between people pleasing and fawning and rejection sensitivity. And I wonder if you could kind of like expand upon that, especially through the lens of, if I have this resistant boss who is unwilling to hear about ADHD or unbelieving of it or whatever, I feel like in some cases with that power dynamic, there's going to be a potential for more people pleasing. There's going to be more fawning to try to like get that person to believe me or get that person on board with me in an effort to like convince them.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, right, that the single greatest predictor of success in long-term relationships is each individual partner's overall emotional intelligence, the sophistication of that. And in leadership, it's the same thing. It's the leader's overall emotional intelligence that leads to greater success in leadership. And I guess that shouldn't be surprising because outside of our intimate relationships, heck, sometimes superseding them, my husband has a work wife. That was his boss for a while, right?
Yeah.
Some of the most significant long-term relationships we have are at work. That's why so many workplaces call themselves a family.
Yeah.
And, even if you extend that metaphor, albeit problematic, is sometimes your subordinates or the people that report to you are like your children.
Yeah.
Right. And so the same dynamics of understanding, perspective taking, turn taking that you have at home apply at work.
Yeah.
Alternatively, what you see a lot in Gottman's work and in a lot of structured couples therapy work is an attempt to bring the metrics and define periods of time, right? Like the State of the Union meetings at home. Well, that's the same as what the quarterly earnings report
Mm-hmm. Yep.
is an attempt to formalize and matricize what seem like very amorphous relationships, right? Like actually you can define how well a relationship is doing based on how much people communicate, how they talk to each other, that they talk to each other a lot. There was an article in Harvard Business Review a few years ago that said the single greatest predictor of teams doing well regardless of content. It's just that they talk to each other and they talk to each other a lot.
Yeah.
Well, same with families, right?
Yeah.
The single greatest predictor of success in relationships is an absence of the four horsemen: silence, contempt, stonewalling, and criticism, right? Two of which are stonewalling and silence are just not talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to say that when you watch any of my videos, when you watch any of our videos that talk about interpersonal relationships, change the person out, the wife, husband, child, grandparent, parent, to boss,
Yeah.
to colleague,
Yeah.
to subordinate, to person who reports to you. And it pretty much applies the same way.
Well, and I think what I find too is we have a tendency, I don't know, tell me what you think about this. We have a tendency to try a little bit harder at work because there is that level of professionalism and there are more established, here's how you behave at work. Here's how you're supposed to be at work. There are more rules that we have to follow when we're there. And so in some cases, I feel like I'm able to sort of navigate those relationships more because I'm almost being a little bit better version of myself than I am with my partner, because my expectations with my partner are, well, they have to accept me for however I am, but that's where the conflict then comes in the partnership at home.
I would say, as a rule, because white supremacy, high compliance, masking culture created management, right?
Mhm.
Management was founded in slavery. Management schools have to honor that they trace their roots back to plantations, not to Henry Ford.
Yes.
That even the idea of a department manager, those were sometimes slaves that had been elevated and were treated just a little bit better than the other slaves on the plantation, who then had to carry out punishments, management techniques on the people below them. And one of the reasons we know that management, there's a great piece, and again, in Harvard Business Review, I can't remember that researcher, but if you look it up, I think the article is management has to contend with its history with slavery.
Yeah.
That in the North, people just quit, like entire factories, 100% turnover, 150% turnover. It's much easier to manage people who can't leave.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's that management does the same thing to neurodivergent people that it does to people of color, right? If you don't wear the right things, if you don't act a certain way, right? It's not that families have fewer rules, it's that there's a greater diversity of rules, right? Corporate America has put in place, the top Fortune 100 companies, the top Fortune 20 companies, 500 companies. They're all engaging in what is that isomorphic reformation, where they're all trying to look like each other, in that, oh, you hired McKinsey and consultants to change your billing structure. Well, we're going to do that to be competitive. And as we change, even though we started with very different founders, we actually look more and more the same.
Yeah.
So I don't think there are more rules at work. I think that there are more common rules. And I think that the big difference between how we show up, that in relationships, personal relationships, I think people look for authenticity. At work, I think they look for consistency.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't want, even on these things, you don't want my authentic self that's like talking out to Brittany, singing her terribly because I have a scratchy voice. That's not why you tune in to Brett and Bowen, right?
Yeah.
You tune in because we're consistently talking about things that impact neurodivergence, and you and I specifically at work.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to bring our authenticity, but through the consistency of that. So I guess that's what I see. And I think, right, the idea that, like, I will fire you if you don't do this job. Right. And because we don't have universal basic income or universal health insurance, there are no safety nets. You got to do it. It's a do or die.
Yeah. I will add to the reading suggestion. You had the article you just mentioned. I'll also add Nick Walker's neurodiversity paradigm versus the pathology paradigm, that gets into specifically what you talked about with white supremacy culture and, what he refers to. He's quoting someone else, but he's talking about the master's tools and how we have to unpack that to how we get more of our individualized way at being neurodivergent individuals. So I would just mention that as an excellent, reading suggestion. In the workplace conversations, that need for an instant response. Like, we're sitting there in a workplace meeting, the meeting's moving, people look to different, and for so many of us, it's hit or miss. Some of us can be in a flow state where maybe that conversation, maybe that topic, maybe that thing is hitting on that special interest or something we can monotrope on, and we can just launch right into it. Like we've got it at the tip of our tongue. But also at the same time, for many of us, there's that I need time to process. This is a lot. I can't respond in that moment. I'm frozen. I freeze, but then in like a half hour, 45 minutes, or maybe even like a day later, it's come to me and I'm able to sort of respond to that.
I appreciate the work of Vanessa Van Edwards for talking about charisma in terms of competence and warmth that you can really define and then deliver on those skills. But I remember reading an article in the New York Times a few years before that said, charisma is also a speed of processing thing.
Mm.
We like quick answers, and we often equate quick, confidently spoken answers with truth and trustworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find a lot of times neurotypical people are looking for in those meeting rooms is the quick, confident answer. And I think especially for people who are autistic or more autistic in the ADHD, if they're ADHD and leaning more autistic, we want to give an accurate, representative, deliberative answer, not a quick answer.
Right.
And that requires time. That requires me taking in what you've said and trying to connect it to all the different things that I think about that and actually come back with a fully formed answer that I'm going to stand by. I think what's interesting, right, especially if you're a little more ADHD and not autistic, or just neurotypical, is that they change their minds all the time.
Yeah.
They reframe things all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're looking for I want to wait until I give you my fully formed answer that I can stand by. They give an answer and people think it's funny. And then later on, they're like, actually, I got more information. Let me change. And that's somehow seen as more authentic. That's because you're being let in on their process.
Yeah.
Versus I can't let you in on my process because I don't speak before I think.
Yeah.
That is a cost that autistic people pay in the workplace.
Well, and I'm someone who's very protective of that process. And I kind of link that back to masking again, because like, I kind of don't want to show my process because I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be criticized for that process because it's my process. It works and I know it works. And I want to go off and do that alone. I want to do it in my own way, my own style. So this was actually a conversation I was having with a client last week, and I ended up saying to them, well, let me give you 5 lines, take them with you, write them down. Here's 5 scripts, and they're just 1-sentence scripts. You can take this into the meeting and you can buy yourself time essentially. So essentially, something simple like, I'm going to need some time to think on that and process that out and come back to you later. So that at least you're signaling in the moment a responsive nature so that you aren't getting that vibe or that reputation of the person who, there's something that you can participate with. I need a little bit more thinking time on that. I need to go do some research on that. I need to go look into that more. Or I don't have that information at my fingertips, so I'm going to need some time to go figure that out. But just having 3 or 4 lines that you can just sort of like write them in a notebook, keep them with you, keep them on a note on your phone, something so you can just kind of know what they are, so that when something comes up and you're not really sure how to handle in that moment, you can kind of lean into something. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with having a few helpful scripts to get you through a situation like that when you're not really sure what's going to happen in one of those moments.
And I think too, people don't respect the person that always jumps in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You see those, I was watching a Diary of the CEO thing where it's, if you could also design it so that maybe someone at the start of the meeting says something and everyone else chimes in, but it's important, and you sit and you give yourself that 50 minutes to think on it. And then you come back and you say, hey, everyone, I just wanted to go back to what we said at the beginning of the meeting and replay this and say, here is what I think based on everything everybody said, plus other things that have come out in this meeting, plus a little bit of research I've done while we were here, and then lay it out there. The person who speaks last is often the person who's seen as the wise one.
Yeah.
It's the one that everyone stops talking and pays attention to. So I don't necessarily think that deliberative processing, when you have scripts to give yourself bridges, when you can figure out ways to consistently show up and show that the depth of meaning and analysis that you present was worth the wait.
Yeah.
If you start doing that and you do it consistently, that becomes an asset at work over time.
Yeah.
And you'll even have people say, if you got a new boss or a new person who's in the meeting saying like, hey, what do you think? You'll have someone say, oh, give them a moment, because you're going to want to wait to see what they come up with at the end of this meeting. I guarantee it.
Yeah. And that's a great way to support a colleague. That's just such a great and simple way to support a colleague. But also, it's a really good management technique too, because you can sort of be the stronger manager if you say at the start of a conversation, hey, folks, I'm going to present some information. I do have some thoughts on this, but I really want my thoughts informed by you. So I'm going to not share those with you until the room has had a chance to have a discussion. And then I will speak at the end of the meeting with my reaction to your thoughts, and then I'll add my own thoughts as well. Just laying that down as a system of processing also just relieves the tension of like everybody waiting for the boss to say something. I used to have an executive leader who he was like a pot of water boiling over, and you could watch the bubbles rising up in his face as people would talk around the room. He would get fidgety and antsy in his chair, and he had to, like, if they said the thing that he just couldn't possibly live with in that moment, he couldn't wait to cut them off, talk down to them, and then tell them why they were wrong. And then he would expect the room to continue to share their opinion, and it just shut everybody down. And because he was the most executive person, and a very high-ranking one at that, it killed every conversation. And then
Did he have ADHD?
Oh, he is so ADHD. This is like one of those situations where I could recognize he had ADHD, but he couldn't. And I couldn't possibly, he was so senior to me, I couldn't possibly bring it up with him, and he wouldn't have heard it from me anyways. But he also did the thing where the volume of his voice would get louder and louder and louder the more he wanted to talk over somebody. So a lot of us knew this, so we would just we learned pretty early on to just sit back and wait.
Behaviorally, that's kind of sometimes how I can tell the difference between ADHD and AuDHD. That so I've come to realize that my mom didn't need hearing aids. I just needed to talk louder.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She's like, oh my gosh, I can't hear people. I can't hear them. And then, she finally said, well, I can't hear you. I can hear everyone else. I'm like, oh.
Oh, wow.
And then I would have all these interactions with my husband where he said, you'll say something and I'll ask you what, and you think I don't conceptually understand you. So you'll start to give a different explanation, but it's actually that I physically can't hear you and you're saying things in the same volume. What I realize is because I have autism and auditory, I get very overstimulated. I talk very quietly to myself.
Yeah.
It helps that I'm on screen because for some reason, the computer can pick it up, so it's not a problem. But when I am in social situations that aren't like obviously loud, like a bar, I realized I'm talking like this the entire time. And when I actually project my voice so that my mom can hear me, so my husband can hear me, I sound to myself like I'm screaming.
Yeah.
And that understanding has made me realize that, if someone's jumping in and thinking they're right, and they tend to get louder to be heard, and it's not like an uncontrolled meltdown, that typically to me signals more ADHD than autism, because they can tolerate the loudness, right? In a way that with ADHD, with autism, you can't as much.
Yes.
We'll still interrupt you, but we won't like get loud in that way.
I so relate to that. I struggle with that so much. It's so funny that you named that, because I really struggle with that. Yeah. One other thing that you had noted earlier, and so
I'm sorry, see, I'm doing this thing where like you start off and I'm like, let me sit and think. I think that's another, like what I've done here, and maybe keep one of those clips in to see like, that is the process of, it's not that I'm not tracking with you. It's that, and you're giving me grace to answer. It's that my brain goes, oh, and it sounds like I'm interrupting you because you've moved on, and I am, absolutely. But I think that's what you start to have to think about in terms of your cognitive cadence. That sometimes when you're leading a meeting and you're neurodivergent, or you have people who are neurodivergent, you're going to have the me's in the room. I'm a pretty quick processor, but I still have to go through my autistic process of bottom-up deliberation. And so I can give a full and robust answer in a meeting, in a back and forth,
Yeah.
but it just takes me that a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say is, I always think it's interesting in dynamics, both at work settings, like a holiday party, and at home settings, when two families merge or like two different teams merge, there are clearly different types of neurodivergence. The ADHDers are off in the corner just like laughing and clapping and screaming at each other, at least in my perspective as an ADHDer. And the ADHDers are over just like sipping their cocktails furiously, trying to get something to, like, if they don't already have noise canceling
Headphones.
prostheses,
Yeah.
headphones, whatever they're called, plugs, geez,
Yeah.
there it is,
Yeah.
in their ears. You see them just like basically politely sipping, but nevertheless autistically pounding drinks to try and get the alcohol to like turn their brain down,
Yeah.
so they can like get into the foray.
Yep.
And I was at a friend's house where it's like, her family much more ADHD, his family much more ADHD, neither of them diagnosed, both very successful families. But we were at brunch, and she's like on her third mimosa, and they got married after each of their second marriages, and he's like, see, she just likes to drink the alcohol. She likes the alcohol. And she turns to me, she goes, all the time. All the time. And then his mom comes in, and again, I love this woman. She's like,
Yeah.
this thing I got on this safari. And you're just like, oh, I see. Like, if you didn't have alcohol, this would end in a meltdown.
Yes.
So, girl, have your bottomless mimosa if
Yeah.
you need to get through this family gathering. Not because, and she loves them. It's not that she doesn't like them. It's that
Yeah.
sensory things like that can drive those types of behaviors. And once you start looking at it, you're like, oh, that's what's going on.
That's just it. The more we're in touch with that stuff, the more we're realizing those things, the harder it is to not manage it. I'm total. I do that. Like I don't have any good techniques, but when I am around people who are just too loud, it's just kind of like, I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's just like, I need a little bit of like, can I turn the volume down on that person type of thing.